Hey, you're listening to Doc and Lefty. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, tonight. We don't have Lefty with us tonight. He is down in Mexico. Leave it to a left-winger to think going to Mexico in the middle of summer is a good idea. Just like every other good idea. Now, he did have a good idea with this, though. His longtime girlfriend, Megan, is a wonderful gal. And he's decided to make her an honest woman, which I think is rather sexist, don't you? And anyway, he's down there. She said yes. So they're happily in love and going to be getting married, which is, strange for Lefty, a very good decision. We're going to go over a lot of topics tonight. We have a special guest, Dr. Lee Heeb, in our studios tonight. We had a lot of people wanting to ask her some questions. We're going to start off with a brief recap of the 3rd District Convention, which honestly was fairly disappointing to a whole lot of people. Essentially what happened is, as you all know, Robert Kramer was running, as well as Monty Shaw, Joe Grandinette, Matt Schultz, and Brad Zahn. And what happened? And of course, Brad didn't get enough votes, so I had to go to convention. Now, everybody for years, ever since Steve King got elected, everybody has said over and over, listen, instead of having a convention, we need a runoff. And I agree. I agree with that. Because what you have is then you have the party power brokers then figuring out who they want. And who they elected is David Young, who has been described in several different ways unaffectionately. All right. He was described as a carpetbagger. The guy raised $705,000 and barely got any votes, finished 5th, finished ahead of Joe Grandinette, whose only money he had was to go out, buy some signs, paint them himself, and put them out and around. The guy only had maybe $200-300 in his entire campaign. And he got a lot of support. And you look at, Joe Grandinette's, spending $8 a vote, and here's David Young, who won, spending $105 a vote. So essentially what happened is they vote, and then they go vote again. It went through 5 rounds of voting, everybody dropping out. Robert Kramer dropped out as opposed to being voted out. Otherwise, it would have been 6 rounds. And Matt Schultz, who has a history of taking care of his friends at taxpayer expense, including, everybody knows about Jim Gibbons keeping him on the payroll even though he wasn't working, and several other staffers, when that's what he did, made a deal with David Young that said, well, whoever is going to get voted out, we're going to get up and tell our delegates to vote for the other guy. Well, that's what happened. And whenever you do that, because Brad Zahn's picking up a lot of votes, right? Every time somebody dropped out, Brad Zahn picked up a lot of votes. Well, that was basically a stab in the back. It's backroom dealing is what it is. And this is why you don't have a convention, because the will of the people didn't speak. At least in Steve King's district, Steve King won the popular vote. He just didn't get 35%. I believe he got 31%. But at least then the conventioneers picked him. What happened here is the 5th place finisher with ties to Washington, D.C. insidership and ties to the establishment won. And he was a 5th place finisher. He spent $105 per vote, right? Now, the problem is nobody got excited about going out and voting this time around. People are really in the doldrums. People are very just disappointed and, quite frankly, disgusted with the Republican Party and their antics. They can't raise money. They can't seem to agree on anything. They're yelling at each other. They're stabbing each other in the back. They had the A.J. Spiker was the most divisive RPI chairman in the history of the RPI. And his lackey, Steve Bierfeld, did more to alienate the people that give money to the Republicans. People that gave money for their entire lives. People like me, my dad, my brothers. I mean, lifetime Republicans. And these two clowns alienated all of us. I mean, took a big nosedive in the coffers, alienated the Christian conservatives. And we've already talked about you cannot alienate the Christian conservatives because they're the ones with the money. They're the ones that give. So the bottom line is now you have this convention that, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure David Young has great credentials and the rest of it, but essentially it boiled down to the person that was least offensive. Now, in a stand back, take an honest look at the analysis. There was a lot of reasons why people didn't want to vote for Brad Zahn at the convention. Number one, he's the kind of guy that bucks the system. He is. He's not a Branstad guy. I know just from, when you talk to these people enough and you're around these things enough, you get a feeling for who's in the Branstad circle and who is not. And Brad wasn't in the Branstad circle. Brad stood up for mental health funding when the governor wanted to veto it and did veto it. There's all kinds of things that Brad has gone up against the governor and the establishment for. And the problem is, when you get up there to that kind of level where all you have to do is get that convention vote in order to win this district. This district is so heavily Republican, I'm pretty sure that even Maddie could win the nomination if she was the only one running. She could become congressman if she were Republican. So, by the way, I hope Frank's off having a great vacation. Maddie is sitting in for him today, and she does a great job. Apparently, she's been stuck here all day long. So anyway, you get this kind of feeling of, well, hold on. We have a lot of pro-Branstad delegates, a lot of establishment delegates here, and there's all kinds of drama. We went over that before. So it comes to the final vote, and there's Brad Zahn in a commanding lead until Matt Schultz gets up there and stabs him in the back. Made a backdoor deal. Because these two guys, they know how to operate in politics. They just do. They're, great. We already know Matt Schultz is going to help out his friends at taxpayer expense. Well, they just made a deal. Hey, listen, one of us wins. The other one takes us to Washington, D.C., where I have a career. One of them gets a $175,000 a year job. Another one gets a $150,000 a year job. All the great benefits, all that other stuff. None of these. David Young isn't going to vote for term limits. He doesn't believe in them. And I at the Republican dinner out at Jalapeno Pete's got right up there and said, "Well, listen, it's silly to have term limits. Once you get yourself some power and can help your state, and then you're going to retire, that's just silly. That's not the way Washington works." Now, he said that when he's running for Senate, right? But that's still going to be the same attitude he has as a congressman. Is that the kind of guy you want in there? Making deals, working things. And honest to goodness, and I know I'm shooting myself in the foot, and I know that, my shot at getting a cushy job with David Young just went down the toilet with this rant. But the bottom line is we have another Washington insider we're going to send out there for the rest of our lives who isn't going to vote for anything financially conservative and is going to vote to increase big government. We've talked before about how the Republican Party is not much different than the Democratic Party. We're just arguing on how much socialism we're all going to have. On that note, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook and docandlefty.com. We want to thank all of our sponsors, and unfortunately we lost Brad Zahn as our sponsor. We'll be back right after the break. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. After this break, we'll be talking with Dr. Lee Heeb and her ongoing quest to be governor of Iowa. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back right after the break. So I do a lot better than me.
Associates, how can I help you?
Bertroche and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Hey, what's wrong?
Logan wants Let's Rock Elmo for his birthday, but since Steve lost his job, I don't think we can afford it. What did you do for money last year when you and John were struggling to make ends meet?
My secret? I went to Me and Mommy to Be. We sold all of Megan and Ryan's clothes and toys there. They give back the highest percentage on their items in the area, and it was so easy.
Megan's clothes? She's 15.
Yes, they can sign newborn through trendy teens. We're not struggling now, but I'm going to keep saving and making money at Me and Mommy to Be.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in. We're going to be talking with Lee Heeb. She's an orthopedic physician in Northwest Iowa. Is that correct? And she is going to, she's running for governor on the Libertarian Party ticket. She was a guest here about a month or two ago, and we had such a great response, and people kept saying, here's the questions we want to know. So we're going to go back, and Lee was great enough, or I should say Dr. Heeb was great enough to come back on the show, and we're going to talk a little bit more about her. Feel free to call in 855-244-0077 for your questions. We'd like to have you, we'd like to have any conversation, any questions at all. Dr. Heeb, how's the campaign been going, treating you so far?
Well, there's been some snags, mostly a little snag with the media, but we're doing okay. We're getting a lot of response, and we're getting a lot of good people support us.
Now, why don't you briefly remind people where you're from, why you're running, those kind of things?
Well, I couldn't have had a better reason for running than the reasons you just gave in discussing the primary runoff in the Republican Party. I mean, I'm a recovering Republican. I was a lifelong Republican. And for the reasons that you just said, in fact, I didn't know I stole this line from Ronald Reagan, because people say, well, why did you leave the Republican Party? And I said, I didn't leave the Republican Party. They left me because I'm still standing on the Constitution. I just gave up on any notion that they were going to change, because I see their role as moving to the left in trying to capture the left-leaning independents. And I'm not talking about the grassroots Republicans, my friends in small-town Iowa. I'm talking about John Boehner and Karl Rove and the architects of the current Republican Party, and that's just why I left them. However, it's really not that different between the Democrats and the Republicans these days. They have both, if you look at Iowa, we now have the biggest government in the history of the state, and we were just given this big jump in government by a Republican governor. So I have to say that I think it's time to start looking at other alternatives. And the more I've gotten into this, in fact, since I was here on the show last, Doc, was, I've actually come to the conclusion it's not any one individual, it's not any one person we send to Congress, or it's not any one person in the state Senate. It's the political machines on both sides of the aisle that have become the oligarchy that we are living under. And if we really want to save ourselves, here's a fact I learned since I was on here. Do you know that we have 20% more government workers per capita in the state of Iowa than they do in California? Now, that should put ice in the heart of every Iowan.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is a scary statistic. Besides being number one in the corporate tax and 5 from the top in the personal tax, I mean, we're out of control on regulation and taxation and government growth. And we're about to have a huge growth thanks to Common Core and Obamacare. But my point is that it's not just one party that brought us this. It's both parties. And so your lead-in was very good. That's why I'm a libertarian. There actually is another party out there, and all over the world, libertarianism is breaking out. In Ontario, Canada, which is a very liberal province in Canada, the libertarians are actually posed to take the majority seats.
Well, that's good, because one of the things, what we're going to do, one of the questions right off the bat is, now I have to look at it. See, that's the kind of host I am. Have to look at my things. This question is, she meaning
Me.
Dr. Heeb, has been excluded from the IPTV debate with Branstad and Hatch. The criteria to appear on the debate is goofy, and in part based on her having one of the requirements having been to raise more than $50,000 in campaign funds.
Ironically, that wouldn't be our problem. I mean, we don't have $50,000 in the kitty right now. Could we put $50,000 in? Yes, we could. Between, just like the Democrats do, and if other people, we could have a few big donors help us put in some money. But here's the real crux of that matter. They appear to have, and we had a very nice sit-down talk, by the way, not about the debate, but just about being on Iowa Press. And they're nice people at Iowa Public TV, and I don't think they have really thought some of the implications of this out. And or they, I can't say their motives. I'm just saying they're nice people. I don't think it's an evil organization. But here's the problem. These rules are set up And it very cleverly excludes third parties. It sounds objective, and I had somebody say, why don't you just get off your ass and do it? Well, the first one is that you have to be a recognized party by the state of Iowa, and I can't change that. Unfortunately, even though the Libertarian Party is the third biggest party in America, we're represented in all 50 states. We have people in all counties working for us, and we're on the ballot. I mean, we're on your registration form. We are not considered an official party in the state of Iowa. So I can't help that one.
What would you need to do to be an official party?
We have to get 2% in the last election, okay, of some major seat, okay? Well, like Gary Johnson got 1%, okay, but times are changing. And right now, for example, the Libertarian in Florida is ahead of the Democrat, and there's a Libertarian in North Carolina or South Carolina that's even before the primary, the Republican and Democrat primary, and he didn't run a primary, it was 11% in the polls. So there are people that are around the country, libertarians, that are getting traction. So looking at the last election doesn't really give you a good pulse on what's going to happen this time. The fifth, then there's three other criteria we could make. One of them is, have you been on various press shows? Have you, stated your policies? Do you have a website? Do you look like a legitimate candidate? Blah, blah, blah. And the last one is, have you gotten over 5% in an independent poll? Well, the problem is, who runs the polls? The people that run the polls never ask about the third-party candidate. So they don't ask about Hebe. They ask about, would you vote for Branstad or Hatch? So you can't get very much traction in that. In spite of that, we had 2.5% in the last poll who said, we're going to vote for somebody else. They didn't name who they were going to vote for. And I've also had people say, the minute they say, no, I'm going to vote for the Libertarian candidate, literally they get hung up on. So the polls are specifically targeting to the two big
Why do they get hung
parties.
up on the Libertarian candidate then?
Because these polls are being run for the Republicans and Democrats. And I, honestly, I didn't used to believe this. There's an old Soviet phrase. You go to the Ukraine, you would find those. The Soviets used to have a phrase. It's true when it happens to you. I used to hear this unfairness, and I said, "Oh, it's just a bunch of whiners," but it's not. It really is.
Yeah, and it is. It's designed. The entire system is designed to keep the same people in power. Now, there's a guy named John Thompson, Jon, not the guy running for whatever it is, and. He's a big lefty, and I'm like, why do you support the Democrats or anything? He goes, I don't. Well, but you're so left. And he goes, I don't support either party because their only goal is to remain in power. It's not to represent the people, and they're in collusion with it. And I thought to myself, he's right about that. They do collude quite a bit. So if you could raise $50,000, don't you think that would add more legitimacy to your campaign?
Oh, we can do that. I don't think that's really the problem. Well, here's little things. I mean, there's little things that, not being a political insider, we didn't understand. Now, I contacted the Des Moines Register, and I just wrote them a nice letter and said, hey, you haven't mentioned us. I've been invited to do all these other things, but do you think I could, would you be interested in an interview or discuss the campaign? And they sent me kind of a one-liner back. When you're actually on the ballot, we'll send you a survey to see then about you. And
you don't want to be in the register. They'll never quote you correctly.
Well, that may be true, but nonetheless, do you really think they waited until Jack Hatch had all his signatures in order to put him in the register? I mean, to even talk about him, to even mention that he existed? I find that hard to believe.
Well, that's true, but you're talking about a Democrat, right? I mean, they'll support anybody. I can see Maddie in there going, oh, my goodness, I don't know how Ryan puts up with this for an entire hour. Anyway, speaking of which, our segment's over. Dr. Hebe, I'm hoping, is going to be with us in the next segment because we have several more questions to go over. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in tonight. We really do appreciate your support. We're here every Tuesday to bring you, and I can't say Lefty's phrase because I screw it up every time, but we really appreciate it. I try to bring all sides of the issue in. We'll be back right after the break. You listen to us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. right here on webcast1live.com. We'll be back right after the break. Ask more questions of Dr. Lee Hebe.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey, thanks everybody for tuning back in. You're listening to the Doc and Lefty show on webcast1live.com. We have the incomparable Dr. Lee Heeb, who's running for governor today. She's an orthopedic surgeon, doesn't believe in the status quo. And you know, when you have a libertarian quoting Reagan, you know something's not quite right in the universe of the Republican Party. I just want to take a brief sidestep. This is another issue I was going to talk about. The Republican Party, since 2006, has done everything it can to alienate its base and to create 3 and 4 and 6-headed monsters. It eats itself alive. It takes out the number one people. And, you know, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of Chris Christie. I'm not. But the guy says what he means. He does what he says he's going to do, and he's under attack all the time from the left. Why vilify the guy? Same thing with Todd Akin. Todd Akin misspoke, right? He misspoke. People make mistakes. And yet our own party threw him under the bus. And then we're all talking about the Ted Akin syndrome. Well, if we had stuck by our guy like the Democrats stick by Biden, right, and Robert Byrd back in the day, we would have people elected. But instead we get afraid because, oh my goodness, we might offend a Democrat, and then we're done. And now, this is my own personal beef. I know Danny Carroll strictly by reputation. Strictly. I don't like AJ Spiker. I never made any bones about that. Steve Bierfeld, at least he would come and talk to you and explain what he did. Right? AJ, no, I'm going to, manage from on high. Now, the trick is, here's Danny Carroll, who is a social Christian conservative, who had to run all the conventions, the nomination process, the whole 9 yards, 2 or 3 weeks before everything really got busy. And he was just thrust in that role. He handled it great. The 3rd District Convention went off without a hitch. All the other conventions went off without a hitch. The Central Convention went off without a hitch. And you know how they're going to reward him? They're going to fire him. They're going to can him. Hey, Danny, you did a great job. Screw you. Then the Republicans wonder, hey, I wonder why we can't raise money. It's laughable. Steve Scheffler goes to, I believe it's the 2nd District, tries to explain, hey, this is why we're going to get rid of Danny Carroll. I mean, it's a 20-minute video. And as you're sitting there, what he's saying is, well, we don't believe Danny Carroll can raise the money that we need. The guy's only had the job on his own for less than 2 months, right? And all the people with money that are social Christians and conservatives, me, Steve Deace, Bob Vanderplatz, those are just 3, are all going, well, hold on. We like Danny. We like what he stands for. We want to support him. And yet you guys are going to fire him. Now, I don't know if Branstad's behind it, but somebody's behind it. And in the 2nd District, they had a vote of no confidence in the Central Committee of the Iowa GOP. Now, it's non-binding, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to help anything one way or another. So now you have all kinds of people going to run for chair, co-chair, the rest of this. It's just silly. You have a guy who's a strong conservative Christian who's trying to bring together the liberty wing and the Christian wing, because these are the two that are really duking it out, right? The moderate Republicans are standing back going like, I'm not even sure I want to be a Republican. Honest to goodness, because we're scaring people away from the Republican Party. We're supposed to be first in the nation. We're supposed to be electing presidents. We're the people that's supposed to be determining the course of America, and this is how we're acting. There needs to be a change in the basic attitudes of the leadership of the Republican Party. That's all there is to it. And to have Steve Scheffler get up there and say, well, we don't think Danny Carroll can raise that much money. Why don't you give a guy a chance? You got to give a guy a chance to raise that kind of money. Matt Strawn was able to do it. Unfortunately, he did. He screwed up. And then on top of that, since everything, it's ancient history because he screwed up the ballot, Rick Santorum and I think Mitt Romney, and they couldn't decide how many votes separated them. He miscalled. So he didn't handle that correctly. He handled everything else correctly. So the powers that be got him out of there because they want their party pure. Well, honest to goodness, if you want a pure party, you're not going to win any elections. There's no such thing as a pure party. And the reason is you got guys like me. I don't look like a conservative Christian Republican. I look the furthest from it. But I am. I'm the kind of guy you're going to eliminate. That's exactly what's going on. Mitt Romney did a really good job at alienating the base. And our own Iowa Republicans are doing an even better job. And these guys better get it together. I'm going to tell you, you know why Lee Heeb has a chance? Nobody's going to vote for Jack Hatch, right? Jack Hatch, he's got a lot of baggage, a lot of bad baggage. But there's a lot of people don't like the way the Republican Party are going either, and they're looking for an alternative. So with that segue, we're going to get back to more questions. I just had to get that off my chest. I still cannot get over that they're going to get rid of Danny Carroll because they don't think he can raise enough money. He's only been there 2 months. He hasn't even had a chance to raise any money. He's done a great job organizing these things. And in my opinion, that 3rd District convention might not have had the result I wanted. Not the result a lot of people wanted, but it ran smoothly, it ran well, and everything went great. That's the bottom line. You get a guy that can do that, that's what we need. You don't even have to like what he says, you just have to be able to organize. So we're coming back to Dr. Heeb. We have another question here. And of course, Dr. Heeb is an orthopedic surgeon up in northwest Iowa. And of course, she's trying not to take too much Obamacare because that is a punishment. Oh, I have a story for you during the break. I have a story about that. Next question is basically it cuts right to one of your hardcore issues. Iowa's tax is 8.9% for income over $67,000. Do you believe in making Iowa a flat tax state? And if so, what would that tax rate be?
Well, the flat tax, I think, for income tax should be 0. If you look at the states that are ahead, that are growing people and workers, not growing government, they're people that have no state income tax. I mean, there's 2 things wrong with the state income tax. One, it's a job killer. And you can see that by just looking at the ALEC map of states that are growing and doing well economically, and they're all states that don't have a state income tax. But ethically, it's wrong. It forces people to pay for their taxation for things they don't agree with, and I think that's absolutely
like bicycle trails.
Yeah,
we have millions
whatever.
and millions of dollars every year. In fact, Clive just had to spend $250,000 to maintain their trails, and now they just decided, well, bicyclists can have their own lane. How many millions of dollars do we waste on a sport that's only going to be around for 3 months in the summer, right? That's my own personal beef. So you believe it should be 0.
I believe it should be 0.
People pay on what they consume, which is much
User
more
taxes.
egalitarian.
User taxes.
All right.
And here's the other point. The other things people say
So
is,
what would be your user tax and how high would that be?
well, I mean, again, I'm not in favor of raising taxes. I don't think we need to raise any taxes. You say if you get rid of the income tax, business is going to boom. People will be buying more things. You're going to have more sales tax, more other revenue. But here's the thing. The key point here is you can't have taxes chase the size of government and chase regulation. What we have to, one of the examples, I was in a Harrison County thing where everybody's talking about roads. Oh, roads are expensive. We can't afford to repair roads. We need to do something. So what's the answer? Well, the first thing government wants to do, your governor wants to double the gas tax. Well, it turns out that's just not going to work. It doesn't get money to the farm to market roads, and it makes it unaffordable for the guy who just has a marginal income to pay for the gas tax. Okay, so what do? The answer is, why are these roads so expensive? They're so expensive because we've regulated the hell out of the ability to grow and build the roads. Let's look at what costs money. Let's get rid of the unnecessary regulation that's making it unaffordable. Putting these bridges back into shape, doing a lot of things. We could do it in the 50s. Why can't we do it now? We're a much more theoretically prosperous. Well, we're not, because regulations actually take more money away from our pocketbook and more money out of our economy than does taxation. So the answer is deregulate so that your taxes cover what you need.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank Dr. Lee Heeb for coming on the show tonight. She's a Libertarian candidate for governor. I also want to thank some of our sponsors. Of course, Lubinas Law Firm. Blake really does a pretty good job, and he's kind of a bulldog when he gets onto something. He specializes in family law. So, unfortunately, if you need the services of a family lawyer, you can give him a call. He's a pretty good guy. He does that stuff. I will tell you, you never want a lawyer. If you have to go talk to one, you're in trouble anyway. But if you need to have one, Blake's a pretty good one to go to. I also want to thank Des Moines Anesthesia PC for sponsoring our show. They have offices here in Des Moines and in Fort Dodge. Maddie, our new producer, apparently can't put that up real quick, so we'll be okay. She can't find it. It's all right. It's 263, I think it's 56813, something like that. 5316. Hey, that was pretty close. 263-5316. Apparently she was asleep. She's been here all day. And so we want to thank all of our sponsors for tuning in. Of course, we also want to thank our sponsors for the studio to keep our lights on. We also want to thank Halo Capital. They help out quite a bit. They're a financial group. And those are our sponsors. So please visit them. They all have websites. You can find them. We're going to come back again with Dr. Lee Heeb right now. The next thing is, have you seen the tax returns Jack Hatch has provided? Apparently, he's provided tax returns. Have you seen those at all?
No. And to be honest, I'm filled with ennui about them. I don't think that should be an issue.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I'm not going to vote for somebody or not vote for somebody on the basis of their tax return. And the next thing I would have to say is that, I don't think we should be upset. People were upset that Mitt Romney made a lot of money. Really? Why should we be upset with success? Let's just. I'm not sure what the point is.
The liberals can't stand success.
Yeah,
because everybody has to be equal, right? And Hillary just demonstrated that. She got up there and said, out of all the millionaires in the U.S., I had to work for mine, and I'm not nearly as wealthy as those really well off. Even though I have 2 multi-million-dollar houses and, I make $50 million a year and, I'm dirt broke compared to everybody else I hang out with.
Right.
That's the problem with the liberals. They use these voting blocks as whipping boys. That's what they do. Yeah, the black vote who come out there and they say, hey, listen, I want the gravy train too. These guys have too much. And they use the unions and they say, hey, I work hard for a living. And these guys are making money giving speeches. I want a bit of that. Well, that all works fine until you're Al Gore when he's making his billions of dollars off the climate change, hoax. And then, you have the Clintons and Hillary getting up there saying, well, we're almost broke. We only got $50 million in the bank. Well, it just shows the general disconnect. I thought you would have figured that out by now. It's just the liberal pablum that comes out, and that they just don't want anybody to be successful. That's why they have the taxation that they have.
Oh yeah. But my point to most people is, look, everybody be doing better. The middle class. The reason the middle class is collapsing is because we're all carrying a 180-pound man, or actually maybe a 250-pound man, government worker on our back. Let's quit supporting the government and start supporting ourselves. They say for every government job you lose 2 in the private sector. That's how you get ahead. You get economically ahead by actually producing things other than government. Yes,
I agree with that 100%. Now, we're talking a little bit about government expenses. What would you do to cut a ballooning state bureaucracy? Because you kind of took a swipe at Governor Branstad a little bit earlier, talking about how this is the biggest budget we've ever had, which is true. But at the same time, he's balancing the deficits and everything else, putting money back into the coffers, making us back into the red. How can you kind of attack the governor for doing something that on the whole is a positive?
Well, he's positively gotten us in the black, but he's done that by sucking the money out of the private sector. It doesn't matter if the government's in the black, if everything is government. And we're literally, they added $1 billion to the government budget. That's the biggest jump in the history. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the people of Iowa, unless he's planning on stealing it through federal tax dollars from other states. So you can't keep doing that.
Well,
so,
you did have a giant property tax cut, though. Don't you think that's good?
How can you do that? How can you increase the budget of the state and cut the property taxes and say you're not going to take more money somewhere else? You've got to take the money. And what I'm saying is what we need to do is we don't cut all government jobs. I mean, I'm not an anarchist. I don't think all government jobs are bad. What you need to do are cut these what I call them the over-regulators. We need to take on these unelected boards, unelected immortal boards that send out regulators. You know, I'm reminded we're coming up on the 4th of July, and one of the complaints the colonists had against King George was that he sent out his minions to, basically regulators that ate out the lifeblood of their citizens. And what they did is they taxed everything and they regulated everything and they wrote little tiny laws that covered everything. And that's the people we need to cut. And I have to tell you, I mean, I can look at it in the hospital industry. You can look at it in various small businesses. These are people that write regulations, and the only laws that should be written by our Congress, by our elected representatives, and they've abrogated their responsibility to these boards that then write things that carry the force of law.
Well, let's get back to Governor Branstad. I mean, Governor has brought in several large companies. Facebook is the one that's most well known, but there's several other giant companies that have come in, and Microsoft is expanding. And of course, he takes credit for that. But
we lost, if you look at the actual numbers, we lost 24,000 workers last year. South Dakota coincidentally gained 24,000 workers. I don't think it's a coincidence. The coincidence is they have no state income tax and they're number one on the freedom scale because they don't have a ton of regulation like we do. He takes credit for bringing in business because he can show you these big, flashy businesses. But how did he do that? If those businesses need tax breaks, so does everybody. He gave them tax breaks. He didn't give the guy at the grocery store tax breaks. He didn't give the local gas station runner tax breaks. Those are the people that are hurting.
So with the bureaucracy that's growing, where would you start cutting it?
Well, like I say, the first thing I would do is I would cut these unelected board regulators. We just have to start doing that.
You wouldn't just start with a department somewhere?
Well, I think we ought to shrink this. If I had to pick a department, the first one I would shrink or get rid. I don't know if the governor has the opportunity to get rid of them, but we do have the opportunity to shrink them down, and that is the Department of Education. I mean, Common Core is a very bad program, and you can't just get rid of Common Core. You also have to get rid of the Department of Education at the state level that thinks it needs to set standards and regulate the heck out of us, too. I mean, local control of schools is important, and the only way you're going to take that back is to take back the control from the Department of Education. So that's one. In my own profession, your profession, one of the redundancies is we inspect hospitals in this state where the federal government comes in and inspects us to the nth degree. If I'm repeating this, don't let me go on, but I did maybe said that, but we've had 3 to 4 regulators 3 to 4 days in our hospital recently, and the only thing they found after that was that our auxiliary, the gray-haired ladies in the gift shop, their shot record wasn't perfect. I mean, really, that's not a good use of our tax dollars. Stuff like that needs to go. Okay.
We're with Dr. Lee Heeb. We're going to take a brief break. We're going to be back. We want to thank all of our sponsors, Bertrosian Associates, Lubina's Law Firm, Halo Capital, Des Moines Anesthesia. And we want to encourage everybody to stop by the website, docandlefty.com, as well as follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We'll be back right after this break with Dr. Lee Heeb.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We're lucky to have our sponsors. We're also lucky to have our special guest, Dr. Lee Heeb, Libertarian candidate for governor. We've been having a conversation with her all day. For the entirety of the show. She was been in the studios like, are they going to give you a cot out here so you can sleep overnight?
Yeah, they might.
So she was on Mac's show a little bit earlier. Now she's on mine, and we're really grateful. Tomorrow you're going out to the West Side Conservative Club, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, down there at the Machine Shed. That starts at 7:15. So if you want to meet her, get out to the Machine Shed out there on Hickman, right off the interstate. Show up early because seats go fast. Kim Schmidt is one of the people that run it, and he's a really good guy. And so I think they're gonna give you the whole hour out there.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, because I didn't see any other guests on there. And so out there anyway, 7:15 tomorrow. Dr. Lee Heeb will be meeting at the West Side Conservative Club out in I just said
Machine Shed.
Machine Shed. Holy smokes! All right, so we have a couple more questions asked by our listeners. The question is, Dr. Heeb, from your website, it's apparent that education is a serious issue for you. What's your take on the recent challenges to teacher tenure in California and New York, and what, if any, changes to teacher hiring practices would you recommend in order to ensure Iowa's place as a leader in education? We'll go with two questions.
Okay.
We'll call it two questions. What do you think about the challenges and the decisions out there about teacher tenure in California and New York?
I'm going to have to plead ignorance because I'm not sure where that stands.
Well, the Supreme Court has sided with the students and said, this tenure stuff isn't very good.
Right.
Of course, they're trying to rewrite the laws and the rest.
Right. I'm not sure where that's going to end up, though, and what the final outcome is going to be.
Okay.
I have to say two things. If you look at where we were when we were number one, not only probably in the nation but in the world for education, we had real local control. And real local control means that the school board locally sets your curriculum, that the school board raises local money for your school, that teachers teach, and the principals maintained the school and discipline. That worked. We didn't have standards from the state. We didn't have standards from the federal government. We were locally controlled and funded. Now, there's a trial going on, which is kind of like a clinical trial, and I think it's a very interesting one, and that's what's happening in New Orleans after Katrina. After Katrina, it got rid of all the big building schools, and they had to come up with a plan, and what they decided to do was fund the student, not the school district. And what's happened is their scores are going up, and things are getting better. And I think one of the things that we need to say is that by funding, even if you're going to keep state funding, which I'm in favor of going back to local funding, but let's say you agree with state funding so that their underserved school districts get some more funds. Fine, let's fund if you fund the student and not the school, then teacher tenure doesn't really become a huge issue. Because and also I was on I can't remember where I was. I was up in Sioux City on the radio talking about something completely different, and the only question I got was, how do you feel about transvestites teaching in our school? But that really is the answer. Fund the student, and if you don't like the people that are teaching in the school, you move your student to another school and they'll get the message. Then give the school the control over hiring and firing. You have to. You can't have people, we don't want to become like New York where they have teachers that are tenured that haven't taught in years sitting in these ready rooms because they can't be fired. That's a terrible situation to get into and untenable.
Yeah, absolutely. So what one of the things that I found out this last week, that the Democratic platform has as its platform, at least here in Iowa, that no more homeschooling. They don't support that. and no more parent-controlled schools. That's in their platform. What do you think of that?
Well, that's just, I mean, that's horrible. If we let that, I can't even believe the Democrats would put that in their platform. But, you know, if we let that happen, I mean, everybody, I know a lot of people that are in the Democratic Party that probably don't know that's going on. Really, if you let that happen, you've completely lost your freedom. I mean, this is a liberty
absolutely.
issue. And, I mean, I'm just almost speechless with that. I just could
Well,
barely
yeah,
even,
I mean, it's one of those things. And you know, they posted on Facebook. They're all proud of it. I'm like, well, hold on. So we are required to send our children to a school where we can't say what's taught, have no input, have no influence on what is taught, what's important, or even how they're going to be treated or safety issues. That is the problem. You know why? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to bring something up and it's going to get me in trouble. But you know why there's a lot of mass shootings, right? In schools? You know why? There's two reasons. Number one reason, it's a gun-free zone. Every mass shooting ever has happened in a gun-free zone. Number two, these parents are disconnected. If you send your kid off and you expect somebody else to take care of it, that's the problem with our society today. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Oh, I'm going to send my kid off. I expect everybody else to train him and teach him right and teach him how to behave and all this other stuff. You have to do it. And if the laws say, and your plank is, parents can't participate in this, which is what this says, then what vested interest do you have in going down and checking it out? That's just the bottom line. I will tell you, the kids that are successful, I deal with kids all day long. The kids that are successful and complete the programs well, their parents show up to the appointments. They don't send proxies. And that's what we're doing. If the Democrats have their way, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be sending our children out to be raised by proxies. And that's not going to work.
Well,
So-
I actually was a homeschooler, and both of my boys were homeschooled, and I mean, you can see they were failures. One of them's an engineer, and one's a physician. But
Oh my God, a physician?
Yeah, I mean, so
What, you couldn't talk him
I
out
couldn't
of
talk
it?
him out of it. So there you go. He's actually a fourth-year medical student this year. But you know, every time you look at homeschoolers, where are they? Oh gosh, they're winning the national spelling bee. And if you look at the test scores of homeschoolers, on average, they're higher than public schoolers. And tell me again why we are going to take away our constitutional rights to free. To me, I'm just almost speechless. I had no idea that was in their platform. But you cannot let that happen in America.
Yeah, because this just came out this last weekend.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that information. The other thing is there's a guy named Jonathan Narcisse. Have you ever ran into him?
Mm-hmm.
What you just got done talking about the money following the kids, he has talked about that ever since I've known him, back on the school board, right? And don't get me wrong, he irritated everybody on the school board. You know why? Because they want those dollars for themselves. Like these there's IEPs and 504 plans. This is something nobody knows. They come in block grants from the government. If they don't spend that money earmarked for the 504 plans and IEPs, guess who gets bonuses? That's right, the principals and the administration. They get all kinds of bonuses. They don't spend money that's earmarked to help children learn. So where do you think the incentive is to have these schools help your child learn? They don't have any. When my dad was practicing, he loved those kind of cases because he could go in there, swing his big legal mallet, and crush heads everywhere. And I mean, but that's what he would do. He loved that. He fought what he would view as unfairness all the time. And the bottom line is that's what he would do. And that's because that's how these things are set up. When you start depending on the government and having block grants, people are going to do what's best for them, not what's best for your child. And keep that in mind. When there's money involved, the base human instinct takes over. As a psychiatrist, I'm going to tell you we studied that over and over. Now, we're going to be back for our final segment with Dr. Lee Heap. We want to thank her for showing up today. We'll be back right after the break. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and online at docandlefty.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Be back right after the break.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Bertrosh and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertrosh, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Hey, what's wrong?
Logan wants Let's Rock Elmo for his birthday, but since Steve lost his job, I don't think we can afford it. What did you do for money last year when you and John were struggling to make ends meet?
My secret? I went to me and Mommy to be. We sold all of Megan and Ryan's clothes and toys there. They give back the highest percentage on their items in the area. And it was so easy.
Megan's clothes? She's 15.
Yes, they can sign newborn through trendy teens. We're not struggling now, but I'm gonna keep saving and making money at me and Mommy to be.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We want to thank everybody for watching us faithfully. We're here every Tuesday from 6:30, 7:30 p.m. We wish Lefty all the best down in Cancun with his new soon bride-to-be. We want to thank Maddie for showing up and taking over for Frank. We need to give you a nickname, Maddie. What should we call it? Mad Dog? Yes, because she's the opposite of Mad Dog. She's a really sweet gal. And she's been losing a ton of weight. How are you doing that, Maddie? Just diet and exercise? Stress, she said. So we're here with Dr. Lee Heap. We were talking a little bit before about the school system. Now, we've gone through all of our questions until just this very moment. And one of the questions they have is, why do you think that the libertarians can't raise the money they need to raise? Because, I mean, honestly, a solid 25% of the Republican Party is libertarian. Mm-hmm. Why don't you think there's a schism there? Why you all just don't go, we're just libertarians now? How come, because that would obviously raise you some money.
Well, sure. I think one of the problems is people have kind of a misconception about who libertarians are. And they see us as tinfoil hat wearers who have their only goal is to make marijuana legal. And that's not who we are. We're really about freedom, small government, constitution. And honestly, I had a group of liberty-minded people in Iowa say to me, you know what you need to point out is that take the Republican Party platform and point out that you're closer on the points than Branstad is to every point. That's probably a good thing to do. No, we're what I think the Republican Party set out to be. I mean, basically, we believe in the Constitution, and like I say, I'm here because they walked away from me. You know, the day that John Boehner said to Harry Reid, well, okay, we'll give you Obamacare, just don't let it apply to us. That should have told every Republican what they needed to know about the Republican leadership.
Absolutely.
They don't care about your health and welfare, and they really don't care what you think, because how many grassroots Republicans want Obamacare? So they're pandering to a whole different audience than the people on the ground. But libertarians, we don't like government solutions for things. And so I think we're a little more adamant in that point, perhaps, than the Republican. And the Republican Party has not shrunk government. And we really believe that's the great evil in the world, is the size of government.
Yes, well, and I think you would agree with most people, even Democrats I talk to think, man, we're spending a lot of money.
Well, and let me just point out something. This is something that you're a physician. You can appreciate this analogy. I started thinking about it. The disease that killed the most people in the 20th century was smallpox. It killed 200 million people, roughly. However, government dwarfs that. Government is the biggest killer of humanity in the modern world of anything. And yet the difference is when we had a smallpox outbreak, we recognized it as a great evil, of a killer of humanity, and we extirpated it. We sent out teams of physicians and nurses and vaccines, and we got rid of smallpox in the wild. But we keep asking for bigger and bigger government. It's like asking for smallpox. What are we doing? I just occurred to me, the other day sitting around, but as a physician and looking at the analogy, I think it's an apt one. And so I think the key point, and here's I think what people fear. When you were talking about the Liberty Party and the Christian conservatives, when we all get together, we're a very powerful force. When we all recognize that it's in all our best interest, that all of our problems, I think, will be solved when we shrink government and get them to go away. We get them out of the moral fabric of society and out of the economics of our society. We'll all get along great, and we can take this back.
Well, I agree with that. Now, another thing on the Democratic platform that I want to bring up is foreign aid, and they support giving foreign aid, but not on religious basis. What's your take on that?
I really don't think we should be giving foreign aid. It ends up, I'm not saying we haven't done some good with foreign aid, but let's face it, it's slushy, it's crooked, and it It's just it breeds corruption. You know, a friend of mine just got back from Afghanistan. He was there for a year as a physician, and they had he was out forward deployed from Bagram, and they had a bank. And in this bank, it was made out of plywood. It was called the bank, but it was really the Navy provost or whatever, the Army provost. What it was, they had $3 million in cash at any given time there to bribe the warlords. And when I heard that, I said to him, John, you know, we can't possibly win in that type of situation because we're going to be crooked.
Do you know
they
how
can't
that?
keep us
Do you know
clean.
how that started? Do you know how that started?
Well, we've been doing that kind of thing for a long time.
Well, true, but we haven't actually deployed money to a battlefield. We didn't do that in World War II. We didn't do it in Vietnam, right? This has been a new thing, and specific to Iraq and Afghanistan. The French pulled out of a sector, and the Americans then took over that sector, and we started losing lives like you wouldn't believe. Right, in Afghanistan, we couldn't figure out what was going on. Through the grapevine, through the Australian forces, they told the U.S., well, what the French did is they just had a big pool of money and they just paid the people off not to attack. So that is the standard of behavior now, and I just think that's awful.
It is awful. But
now, how are you going to? One of the things is medical marijuana, and I know I get this question all the time.
Right.
I know you do. Despite the studies that say medical marijuana leads to full-on, marijuana usage, and all the negatives that come along with this, because we study this. We now have Washington State and we have Oregon State, where we can now, as a psychiatrist, focus on what is actually happening there. The statistics are abysmal out there as far as the employment, as far as mental health services, drug courts, all that stuff. The numbers are simply abysmal, and they're plummeting as marijuana penetrates the family. What would you do? How are you going to respond to critics here when because that's a major platform for you guys? I mean, that generates a lot of your supporters, motivates.
Well,
I
wouldn't say it's, we have a lot of people that believe, and honestly, I have to say, and I'll look at it from the trauma aspect. When I go into the emergency room, and I used to be a big trauma person down in Arizona, I never saw people there who had done marijuana. It was meth, PCP, and alcohol. If there's almost nothing.
But that's where that stuff starts. I mean, that's what the studies show. That's what the statistics show in these two states. We're now following Colorado, and of course, it's way too early to get any reliable stats at that point. So, how are you going to respond to people that bring up these statistics to you?
Well, I'd have to look at the statistics, but I have to say honestly, I'm not, with all due respect to Willie Nelson, I'm not advocating marijuana as a lifestyle, but we never get rid of things by making them illegal. When we try to make alcohol illegal, we got the mob. When we made marijuana illegal, we got the Cali cartel. There's some things that are evil you cannot legislate away. And no matter how much money we've put into our police forces, the federal government can't keep drugs out of federal penitentiaries. There's no evidence in my lifetime that we're winning the war on drugs, but we're spending a heck of a lot of tax dollars, billions of tax dollars. Even in Iowa, we're spending a ton of money. And what's it gotten us? Well, I'll tell you what it's gotten us. It's militarized our police forces. And that's not a good thing. I mean, our police forces now have tactics and weaponry that only the Army had before. And that's really as a result of the drug war. Secondly, I would have to say that 75% of the drug lords' money comes from marijuana. If you want to kick the knees out from under these guys, get rid of the marijuana. And I have to say, and I may be wrong about this, Doc, we'll have to keep in touch about this, but the thing of it is, I wonder, you're starting to see all these stories come out about death from cannabis, death from marijuana. In 10,000 years of human history, we have never seen death from marijuana, and the amount of, you'd have to smoke 20,000, I don't smoke marijuana, but I understand you'd have to smoke 20,000 joints to even come close to a toxic level. Where is this coming from? Even Governor Branstad mentioned it on Simon's show. I mean, the guy in Colorado that supposedly died from marijuana, he jumped off a balcony. That's not he was agitated. That's, as you know, that's not a sign of marijuana.
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah, we can discuss this during the break. I hate to cut you off.
Okay.
We have to go, but we can discuss this during the break. Oh, I know.
Okay.
I did what Lefty does to me all the time. So I apologize, Dr. Lee.
Okay.
She's welcome to come back. We'll have her come back. We'll have this discussion a little bit later. We want to thank all of our sponsors, Halo Capital, Lubinus Law Firm, Petrosian Associates, and Des Moines Anesthesia for their support. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and docandlefty.com. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, I don't know if I don't think I'll be here. Lefty will be here. And so hopefully we'll have a cool co-host like Brad Zahn or Tom Shaw or any one of a number of really cool conservatives. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Get over here. Love both of them.